A middle-aged man in a simple shirt, slightly frayed jeans, and shoes that were no longer new, walked slowly through the doors of a famous restaurant located in the heart of downtown Austin. No one in the restaurant recognized him, nor did anyone notice his eyes, which were quietly observing every detail from the arrangement of the tables and chairs to the indifferent nods of the staff as they greeted guests. But what they didn't know was that man was not a passerby. He was Mason Ellery, the founder and CEO of the Ellery's Prime Steakhouse chain, with 15 branches throughout Texas. 15 years ago, he had personally grilled every rack of ribs, hand-picked every charcoal briquette, and directly trained the first team of chefs with all his passion. But then, like all founders, he was swept into the vortex of expansion, investments, board meetings, and 100-page-long reports. Mason hadn't set foot in a kitchen for nearly 4 years, and for him that was a silent loss that no one understood. Until a few strange reviews appeared online, diners praised a new dish as wonderful, but complained about the staff's attitude, about silly mistakes in service, about a feeling that something was off. Mason didn't call the manager. He didn't organize a meeting. Instead, he decided to do what few would dare: return to the first restaurant as a stranger. No more Italian suit, no more private driver or familiar luxury car. He borrowed his assistant's car, wore an old baseball cap, and used a fake name, Mark Jennings. Stepping through the familiar doors, he was immediately enveloped by the aroma of grilled meat, of oak smoke, the very scent that had been his breath in the early days of his startup. Everything seemed normal, but he knew normal wasn't what he was looking for. He didn't know that. This visit would uncover not only a cruel conspiracy silently unfolding behind the kitchen doors, but also reveal a secret that had been buried for 7 years, something that could completely change his life and the future of the restaurant chain into which he had once poured his heart and soul. A small bell chimed as Mason pushed the door open, a sound that once signaled the start of his every shift back in the day. The space inside was still quintessentially Ellery's Prime warm yellow lighting, the faint smell of grill smoke in the air, and the black and white photographs lining the hallway, reminiscent of the culinary journey he had painstakingly built. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" A young woman, clearly the hostess, asked without her eyes ever leaving her tablet. "Mark Jennings." "A table for one," Mason replied, his voice low and calm. The hostess swiped quickly on the screen, then nodded. "Yes. Please follow me. A table by the window. It's quiet and cool." Mason nodded, following her. Though his steps were slow, his eyes scanned the entire space from the worn patch of carpet near the door to the carelessly folded napkins on a few uncleared tables. In the open kitchen area at the far end of the room, he saw the team of chefs at work. The flickering flames reflected off their pristine white coats. A young, tall man with neat brown hair was meticulously plating a steak. The way he placed each slice of caramelized shallot, tilted his head to check the composition, then wiped the rim of the plate as if it were a work of art. Mason realized it immediately. This was not one of his old chefs. New chef, he wondered silently. The menu was placed before him along with a quick smile from the waitress. "I'm Carly, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Our special today is the oak-aged wine reduction ribeye, served with blue cheese and charred shallots. It was created by Chef Eli. Our guests are crazy about it." Chef Eli Mason raised an eyebrow, trying to maintain a casual demeanor. "That sounds elaborate." Carly smiled. "It is, but you should try it. I haven't seen a single guest complain about this dish. I'll have one, medium rare, and a starter salad," Mason replied. As Carly walked away, Mason folded his arms, his eyes still fixed on the kitchen. He watched every interaction closely. A server walked up with an order ticket, whispered something to Eli, who frowned, gave a short reply, and then turned back to the dish he was working on. There was something tense, but it was very skillfully concealed. The salad was brought out quickly, fresh greens, butter-toasted walnuts, dried blueberries, and a light honey vinaigrette, still up to Ellery's prime standards. The main course arrived 20 minutes later. When Carly set the plate down, Mason almost laughed out of surprise. The steak was perfectly seared, a smooth layer of wine reduction sauce draped over it, accompanied by just enough melted blue cheese and evenly golden brown charred shallots. Not flashy, not fake, just a plate of steak, so beautiful it made him envious. He cut a piece, brought it to his mouth. His eyes slowly closed. This was perfection. Not just up to standard, but there was something new, something familiar, something very true to the spirit he had once pursued. "Is it good?" Carly asked upon returning. "Excellent," Mason answered honestly. "Please send my compliments to the chef. I'll tell him right away." But a flicker of hesitation crossed Carly's eyes, as if she wanted to say more, but then decided against it. Mason glanced toward the kitchen. Eli was laughing with a young prep cook, but behind him, someone, a cashier, was whispering something to the evening manager. They looked at Eli with an expression that was far from friendly. Mason nodded slightly to himself. The food was impeccable, but the atmosphere here, something was wrong, and he knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Mason leaned back in his chair, his hand resting lightly on his water glass. The delicious taste of the food still lingered, but his mind had already shifted to another track. The small details, the cashier's sideways glance, the server's meaningful shrug as Carly walked by, were slowly connecting in his mind like pieces of an unfinished puzzle. He glanced over at a corner table where an elderly couple was waiting for dessert. Their water glasses had long been empty, and the woman's hand was tapping lightly on the table, the rhythm of impatience. They had finished their meal over 10 minutes ago, yet no one had come to ask what they wanted next. A small detail, but not the Ellery's prime way. Mason gently raised his menu. "Excuse me, Carly, could I see the dessert menu?" She turned back, her smile a bit strained. "Yes, of course." Chef Eli just introduced a new item, a deconstructed apple pie, served with brown butter ice cream and rum caramel. That name sounds very ambitious. "Yes, it's also a controversial dish in the kitchen," she said quietly, then leaned in a little closer. "But the guests love it. I'll try it." Mason nodded. "And Carly, yes, what do you think of Chef Eli?" The question made Carly pause for a moment. Her eyes flickered for a split second before returning to normal. "Talented, very hard-working. It's just, some people find him a bit too serious." "Too serious about maintaining standards?" Mason asked gently. She smiled, neither confirming nor denying. "I'm just a server, you know." Mason nodded slightly, but in his mind, Carly's words rang like a red flag. The dessert was brought out a few minutes later. The deconstructed apple pie, it looked like a symphony composed with cutlery thin, crisp apple slices layered over cream, a sauce swirling in a spiral on the plate, and a scoop of brown, fragrant, buttery ice cream emitting a gentle steam in the center. He took a bite and, once again, was left speechless. This wasn't just a dessert, it was a chef's declaration, creative, daring, and with a deep understanding of every ingredient. This isn't the skill of someone who just got lucky with a job, Mason thought to himself. But as he looked toward the kitchen, he caught a different scene. Eli was talking to a prep cook, and it seemed tense. He pointed at an order ticket, his expression annoyed. The other cook just shrugged, shook his head, and walked away, leaving Eli standing there alone. Behind them, the evening manager Darren appeared, observing with his arms crossed, and then he saw it. Darren approached Eli, said something brief, but it caused Eli's expression to change, not with anger, but with resignation, as if this wasn't the first time. Eli gave a slight nod, turned back into the kitchen, and started refiring a dish. Mason propped his elbow on the table, his eyes never leaving the scene. His suspicion had now become a certainty. Eli was being suppressed by someone, not just by the pressure of the job, but by petty power plays within the very place where he had once placed his heart, and that, to Mason, was unacceptable. He placed his napkin down, stood up, and smiled at Carly as she came to process the payment. "Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Was everything all right tonight?" "Excellent, but I'll be back soon." As he stepped out the door, the Austin night breeze blew gently past Mason's collar. He knew it well, this return trip couldn't be over yet. This was just the prelude, and he would be back, not just to investigate further, but to find out 3 days later, on a lightly rainy Tuesday evening. Mason returned to Ellery's Prime for the second time. This time, he didn't come to dine but to listen. He placed a takeout order through the app, choosing the same oak-aged wine reduction ribeye and a few sides. He arrived 15 minutes early, intentionally sitting on a bench near the cashier's counter, where he could observe part of the open kitchen and the entire takeout order processing area. No one recognized him. A hooded jacket, wet leather shoes, and a book as a prop. It all made him just another uncle who came to pick up food in the rain. 2 cashiers were sitting right in front of him. One was a tall, red-haired woman. Her name tag read Jenna. The other was a smaller, blonde woman named Brooke. The restaurant was slow at the moment. In that quiet instant, they began a conversation they thought no one could overhear. "Have you seen Chef Perfect's special tonight?" Jenna said, rolling her eyes. "It's that bourbon reduction again, with shallots and some kind of truffle something." "Yeah," Brooke snorted. "He thinks he's working at a third-rate Michelin place. Travis was right. Eli is trying to turn this place into Manhattan fine dining." Travis? The name made Mason stop breathing for half a second. That was the former sous chef, who used to work here but had moved to a rival restaurant, Briar and Bone, not long after Eli was appointed. "So, how's the plan going?" Jenna whispered, her eyes looking outside but not noticing Mason just a few feet away. Brooke smirked, smoothly. "Travis said to keep it up, and Eli will either be fired or quit on his own within a month. Yesterday, I swapped his container of pink salt for regular salt. He caught it right on the line. His face went pale." Jenna giggled. "I added 10 minutes to the ticket cook times to make the customers complain. The manager, Darren, thinks he's slow." Mason tightened his grip on the small notebook hidden in his pocket. This was no longer carelessness, it was organized sabotage. "Did you do the seafood thing?" Brooke asked, leaning in closer. Jenna nodded. "Changed the delivery time from morning to afternoon. Eli had to run the kitchen like a madman to get prepped in time. Darren yelled at him right in front of a customer. Ha ha ha. Travis said he'd make it worth our while. The first-class concert tickets for next month are already in. And when he comes back as head chef," Brooke winked, "we'll get good schedules and a bonus." Mason didn't move. His blood was boiling, but on the outside, he remained as still as a statue. Travis, Darren, Jenna, Brooke. A conspiracy was laid bare, and the central victim was Eli, who was in the kitchen, sweating to protect his professional honor, completely unaware of the daggers being stabbed into his back. "Takeout order for Mark Jennings," a voice from the kitchen called out. Brooke walked to the counter, grabbed the paper bag, and gave him her biggest smile as she handed it over. "Here you are. Your total is $54.80. Mason paid, his gaze unwavering as he looked at her name tag. "Thank you, Brooke. I'm sure this will be a very memorable meal." She gave a perfunctory smile. "I hope so." Once in his car, Mason didn't start the engine right away. He sat in the darkness, listening to the rain drumming against the windshield. A conspiracy, a plan, a betrayal. He wasn't just angry, he felt fundamentally insulted. Because the restaurant chain that bore his name, because the values he had sweated to build, were now being turned into a stage for dirty, self-serving, and selfish games. But more than that, he felt for Eli. That chef was still maintaining his craft, still serving with his heart in the middle of a trench, not knowing he was being surrounded. Mason started the car, his eyes blazing in the rain. He would be back, but next time, not just to listen, but to fight, for the truth, for justice, and for a chef who had no idea he was standing in the middle of a storm. That night, Mason barely slept. He spread his notes out on the table, typing up everything he had overheard, every word from the conversation between Jenna and Brooke. The names, the details of their actions, the methods of sabotage. He pieced it all together like a map of a crime. Travis, the former sous chef, was the one pulling the strings. Darren, the branch manager, was the key link, standing in the middle, and either turning a blind eye or directly cooperating. Jenna and Brooke, the two cashiers, were the insiders, carrying out the deliberate acts of sabotage. But what infuriated Mason the most was that Eli knew nothing. He still came into the kitchen every day, enduring all the blame, the suspicious looks, and the professional accidents that were, in fact, attacks. Someone like Eli, with that level of skill, why would he accept this? Why didn't he leave? Why was he still trying to hold on in such a hostile environment? That question tormented Mason. The next morning, he arrived at the Ellery's prime headquarters earlier than usual. The glass building stood in the middle of a modern commercial district, a place that now felt more alien to Mason than ever. He hated how distant he had become from the very kitchens that were once the heart of his company. He went straight to the Human Resources Department, using his high-level access to open the personnel files for the downtown Austin branch. He scrolled to the executive chef section and a name appeared: Eli Walker. Mason frowned. Walker was not a familiar surname. He opened the personal file: degrees, experience, address, driver's license. And then his heart suddenly stopped. In the ID photo was a face so familiar it was heart-wrenching. Though the beard and hair were different, the name had been changed, but Mason could not mistake him. Eli Walker was Eli Ellery, his own brother. Mason's hand clenched so tightly it turned white. All the memories came flooding back: the afternoons the two brothers spent grilling in the backyard as children, the time Eli had angrily torn up the business administration application the family had prepared for him, the time they had a fight so big that Eli left home, declaring he would never ride on his brother's coattails. 7 years of silence, 7 years without a single message. And now Eli had appeared not as the boss's brother, but as an anonymous chef, using his own skills to earn a place in the heart of Ellery's prime. "Damn it, Eli," Mason murmured, his eyes stinging. He had once refused a job offer at the company when Mason had extended it. "I'll make it on my own 2 feet. I don't need your pity," Eli had said, and now he had actually done it. From a no-name, he had become the head chef with no one realizing the blood ties between them. He didn't boast, didn't rely on anyone, didn't take any credit, just cooked, quietly, persistently. Despite the sabotage, despite the isolation, Eli didn't need anyone's protection, but he deserved justice. Mason stood up, his eyes more determined than ever. "Enough," he said to himself. "If you won't let me protect you as a brother, then I'll do it as your boss." He pulled out his phone and called the head of internal security directly. "I need all camera footage from the Austin branch for the last 30 days. All data from the kitchen, the cashier counter, to the manager's office, and all access must be kept top secret. No one is to know. Not a soul." On the other end of the line, the security manager hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Mr. Ellery." When he hung up, Mason closed his eyes for a second. In the darkness, he had found the light. The game had begun, and this time there would be no more room for those who abused their power, no more room for betrayal, only the truth. and a chef who carried the Ellery bloodline standing in the middle of a kitchen with no idea that he was about to be vindicated. A day later, in a discreet conference room located in the basement of Ellery's prime headquarters, Mason sat alone before a large screen, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes glued to every frame replaying from the Austin branch's surveillance system. The overhead angle from the kitchen showed every movement clearly, and every act of sabotage was replayed with irrefutable evidence. Jenna pulled a food ticket from the clip, then tucked it into her pocket before taking it to the kitchen. Eli frantically searched for the order, while the customer waited and waited. Brooke took a special jar of seasoning. Mason recognized it as the Himalayan pink salt he had once loved, and secretly swapped it with a plain white jar of regular salt. She smiled as she placed it on the kitchen line. A video from the manager's office, secretly recorded from a high angle. Darren, the manager, shook hands with Travis. A thick envelope was exchanged, so quickly that it would have been easy to miss without examining it frame by frame. An employee intentionally left a dish to get cold on the pass-out counter before shouting, "Order up," causing Eli to receive a complaint for serving cold food. Mason didn't look away. Each video clip was like a knife cutting into the restaurant's honor, and deeper still, into the pride he had maintained for 15 years. But what made Mason choke up wasn't the betrayal. It was the image of Eli in every one of those videos. He didn't get angry, didn't lose his temper. He just pressed his lips together, bowed his head, and continued to work. One time, when a dish was sent back, Eli quietly tasted the demi-glace again. He frowned, then opened his personal fridge and pulled out his own bottle of stock. Eli had known. He didn't report it, didn't complain. He just quietly brought his own ingredients to start over from scratch. He was silently fighting a war, all while maintaining his skill and his dignity. "Damn it, Eli," Mason whispered. Once again, a mix of anger and emotion swelling inside him. He pressed a button to turn off the screen. The room fell silent. Then he stood up, pulled out his phone, and called the legal department. Prepare a notice of suspension for the Austin branch manager. Compile a list of all involved personnel, and I want a meeting with the entire staff of that branch at the restaurant. I'll be there, not in disguise, unannounced. This time, I need everyone to know who I am. After the call, Mason walked to his office's large window. Below, the stream of people continued to hurry through the bustling city life. They didn't know that in just a few hours, a small earthquake was about to erupt at one of the city's most famous restaurants. He wasn't coming to check on quality anymore. He was coming to demand justice, to reclaim trust, and to restore the honor that was rightfully deserved by a chef who carried the Ellery name, even if he had tried to hide it. 4:30 p.m. The atmosphere at Ellery's prime downtown Austin branch was as tense as a drum. The staff was bustling. Preparing for the evening service. Cutlery was being polished. New menus were being set out, and the chefs were starting to prep the first cuts of meat. And then, the main door swung open. A man walked in, not in disguise, no baseball cap, no casual jacket. He wore a tailored charcoal grey suit, polished Italian leather shoes, and on his lapel was a small pin shaped like an E, the symbol of Ellery's Prime. The hostess was stunned, her eyes wide as if she had just seen a celebrity. "Mr. Ellery?" she stammered. "Yes." Mason smiled lightly, polite but firm. "I'm here for a special staff meeting. Prepare the dining room. I want everyone present: kitchen, servers, cashiers, management, even the dishwashers." The girl nodded frantically, then scurried inside. The news spread like wildfire. "The owner is here." Unannounced. He's sitting in the dining room. Whispers buzzed through the hallways. Everyone adjusted their uniforms, trying to remain calm, but unable to hide their bewilderment. And then, at 5:00 p.m., the entire staff was gathered in the main dining room. They stood in an arc: chefs, servers, cashiers, management. At the very back was Eli, wearing his white chef's coat, standing slightly apart, his expression a little confused, but still maintaining his calm demeanor. Mason stepped into the center of the room. Without needing a microphone, his voice rang out clearly. "I am Mason Ellery, the founder of the Ellery's Prime restaurant chain." Everyone was dead silent. Only the sound of the air conditioning and a few nervous swallows from Jenna and Brooke, the two cashiers who were beginning to look unsteady on their feet, could be heard. For the past 15 years, I have always believed that the quality of our food must go hand in hand with the quality of our people. But recently, I discovered that here, at this branch, the very thing I cherish most is being sabotaged. He turned to a small table that had been prepared. A laptop was connected to a projector. Mason pressed a button. On the white wall, a video appeared: Jenna pulling a food ticket, Brooke swapping the salt jar. The scene in the manager's office where Darren accepted an envelope from Travis. The image of a dish being left to get cold. Eli bowing his head to accept blame, though it wasn't his fault. The entire room froze. Jenna's face turned pale. Brooke wrung her hands. Darren took a step back, his face ashen. Mason turned back, his gaze no longer calm. This is no longer a mistake. This is an organized conspiracy to bring down Chef Eli out of jealousy, out of personal ambition, and because of a former employee who wants to sabotage Ellery's Prime from the outside. And worst of all, it happened right in front of us. He looked directly at Darren. "Do you have anything to say?" Darren was speechless. After a moment, he finally stammered. "Travis, just thought he deserved it more. I was just helping a friend." Mason's voice was low and firm, but he didn't shout. "This isn't helping a friend. This is betrayal. You are terminated, effective immediately. And all of your email and communication data will be locked from this moment on." Turning to Jenna and Brooke, he said curtly, "The same goes for you two. Your employee accounts were disabled this morning. Security will escort you from the premises." A security team stepped in. No one said a word. Jenna and Brooke were in tears, but no one stood up for them. Mason turned back to the remaining staff. He scanned their faces, his gaze stopping on the young prep cook and an older server, the only two who had supported Eli during his isolation. Those who upheld their professional integrity, who stood on the side of what's right, will be rewarded accordingly. But first, I need a private conversation with your head chef." Mason looked directly at Eli. "Chef Eli, may I ask you to join me in the office?" Eli nodded, slowly following Mason. Their eyes met, silent, profound. 7 years, a fake name, a kitchen full of pressure. And now, the confrontation between the two men who shared the Ellery bloodline. The office door closed behind them. Outside, the staff began to return to their work, but everyone knew what happened tonight would be remembered forever. The office door closed behind them. The space was so quiet that Mason could hear the slow tick-tock of the clock on the wall. Eli stood in the middle of the room, still in his white chef's coat. His eyes were cool, but not afraid. There was just something vague, confused, and wary that was clear in his gaze. Mason stood by the desk, unpinned his lapel pin, and set it down. He was no longer the CEO, he was a man, a brother, trying to find a part of himself that he had lost. "Walker." Mason broke the silence. His voice was hoarse, tinged with a bit of nostalgia. "Mother's maiden name. Pretty smart." Eli blinked. Then slowly, he understood. He took half a step back. "You." His voice was thick. "You know?" Mason nodded. "Not at first. But it was the bourbon reduction ribeye that made me suspicious. The way you balance the blue cheese and caramelized shallots. That is an upgraded version of Dad's recipe." Eli looked down. His gaze wavered for a moment. Mason slowly walked closer, keeping just enough distance, not so close as to create pressure, but close enough to communicate from the heart. "You hid your name, applied with our mother's surname. No one knew you were my brother. And you went through all of this without asking for a single privilege." Eli looked up. There were tears in his eyes. "Because I didn't want to be known as the boss's little brother," he said. "I turned down that chance once, and I kept my word. I wanted people to respect me for my skill, not for my bloodline, and you did it." Mason nodded very slowly. "You were appointed head chef on your own merit, because guests loved your food. Because of the way you managed this kitchen in a storm, and still cooked dishes that moved people." A moment of silence passed. Eli looked away, as if trying to hide something. Then he said, quietly, "Are you angry for me hiding my identity? For coming in here without asking?" Mason shook his head, then smiled. "No. I'm angry with myself for taking 7 years to realize that the person who could uphold the soul of Ellery's prime was no one else but you." Eli closed his eyes. A single tear fell silently to the floor. "I thought if I came back with my real name, people would be suspicious. Or worse, they'd think I was someone living in your shadow." Mason came closer, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "But you weren't living in anyone's shadow. You stood tall, and you shone all on your own." Eli let out a tearful laugh. "You still say things that choke a guy up, just like you always did. I learned how after a stubborn kid turned down my offer to be sous chef 7 years ago. Mason patted his brother's shoulder gently. Actually, I know I was wrong. I didn't listen back then. I just wanted to pull you into the company and forgot that. You had your own path. Eli nodded. Then he asked hesitantly, "So now, what are you going to do?" Mason walked back to the desk and took out an envelope. Inside was an official letter of appointment. Eli Ellery, executive chef of Ellery's Prime, Austin, under his real name. No change in position, Mason said, just a change in identity. I want everyone to know who the real soul of this kitchen is. Eli looked at the paper, his hands trembling slightly. And if you want to leave, to open your own restaurant, I'll support you. But this time, not as your boss. As what Mason smiled, walked over, and opened his arms, as your brother. And if you'll have me, as a partner. Eli was silent for a moment. Then he put the paper down, walked forward, and hugged Mason tightly. For the first time in 7 years, the two brothers who had once stood on opposite sides of a battle line were now just two sons of a father who loved to cook, who loved family meals. "I miss Dad," Eli whispered. "I still mark his birthday every year, every dish I cook. I imagine he's standing there watching." Mason held his brother's shoulder tighter. "Dad would be so proud of you. I know I am." The two stood in each other's arms, as if time was blurring, making way for the only thing that remained family. On Monday morning, the atmosphere in the kitchen of Ellery's Prime, Austin branch, was completely different. There were no more wary whispers, no more evasive, cold, or subtly hostile glances. Instead, there was a respectful silence. As Eli walked through the kitchen doors, wearing a brand new white chef's coat with a dark red trim, and the name Eli Ellery, executive chef, embroidered right on the left breast. For the first time, his real name was recognized. No need to hide, no need to avoid it. The young prep cook, the one who had quietly supported Eli during the difficult times, was the first to approach. "Good morning, Chef." His voice was clear, his eyes bright with confidence. Eli smiled. "We have a delivery at 9, right?" "Yes, and I checked the schedule myself this time." The two looked at each other and shared a light laugh. It went unsaid. They both knew what that smile meant now. No one was going to sabotage them anymore. From a distance, the older server Monica, the one who hadn't hesitated to sit with Eli during every family meal, walked over with a hot cup of coffee. "We've been waiting for this day for a long time, Chef." Eli took the coffee cup, his voice soft. "Thank you for believing in me, even when you didn't know who I was." Monica nodded, then walked away, leaving a sense of peace behind her. Everything unfolded like a new morning, not just the work schedule, but the spirit of the team. Mason stood behind the glass window of the office, observing it all without stepping in. He didn't want to steal Eli's spotlight. This was his brother's stage. He saw Eli instructing a new employee on how to distribute heat when grilling meat. He saw him correcting a prep cook's plating, not with yelling or a superior attitude, but with patient eyes. Mason smiled faintly, not because of the food, but because of the way Eli was rekindling the soul of a true kitchen. A place not for power struggles, but a place where people could live out their passion and, together, create something decent. That evening, the restaurant was packed. Some came out of curiosity, after the buzz about the internal shake-up. Some were old customers returning because they heard the great chef was staying. There were also a few first-timers drawn by the latest review in the local paper that praised a young talent who can elevate the traditional steak to an emotional culinary experience. Eli stepped out of the kitchen for a moment carrying a special dessert he had just created, a Mexican spiced chocolate cake, served with a pink peppercorn-infused strawberry sauce and toasted cinnamon ice cream. He personally served it to a family with 2 children, nodding gently as the mother whispered emotionally, "Thank you. This is the first dinner my husband has taken the whole family out for since his accident, and this dessert, it made us feel truly welcomed." Eli just smiled. Good food doesn't just fill the stomach, it heals the heart. That's what my father used to teach. At the bar, Mason overheard that sentence. He turned away, raising a hand to adjust his tie, as if to hide a moment of emotion welling up inside him. Ellery's prime was back, not just in revenue or reputation, but with the core value that Mason had once built, and Eli, with his own hands, had restored it from the inside, like a smouldering ember that never went out. The evening slowly passed in a strangely cozy atmosphere at Ellery's prime. The tables were filled with laughter, candlelight reflected off sparkling glasses, and the sounds from the kitchen rose in a steady rhythm, like a symphony played by people who understood each other in the only language that mattered, passion. Eli had just finished checking the last order tickets when Carly, the waitress who had served Mason on his first visit back, hurried into the kitchen, her eyes somewhat tense. "Chef Eli, there's someone waiting for you at the bar." Eli looked up, a little surprised. "Who is it?" Carly gestured slightly. "Someone. I think you should see." Eli wiped his hands, took off his kitchen gloves, and stepped off the line under the quiet gaze of his new team people who now saw him as a true leader. When Eli reached the bar, he froze. Travis, the former sous chef, the man who had manipulated everything from the shadows, was sitting on the end stool. None of his old arrogance left. He wore a light blue shirt, its collar slightly wrinkled, his eyes tired, but not avoidant. "Hey," Travis said quietly. Eli didn't reply, just stood there, silent, waiting for an explanation. Travis pulled a light brown envelope from his breast pocket and placed it on the counter. "It's an apology letter, handwritten. There are no excuses in it. I just wanted to give it to you in person, not through email, not anonymously." Eli glanced at the envelope, not rushing to take it. Travis took a deep breath. "I know. It's too late for everything. I was jealous. It's as simple as that. The day you were chosen as head chef, I felt like I was being left behind. I thought if I pulled you down, I would feel better. But it turns out I was just digging my own grave." Silence. Then Travis looked directly at Eli, his voice choked with emotion. You still maintained the quality. You still protected the kitchen, and that made me ashamed. Eli replied gently, "It's not that I'm stronger. I just didn't want any parents walking in here to have to eat a dinner that tasted of bitterness. As for me, I've had my fill of it." Travis nodded, pulling 2 theatre tickets from his wallet. The concert tickets for next month. I promised them to Jenna. Now there's no one to go with. I'll donate them to the restaurant's charity fund if you'll allow it. Eli nodded. I'll pass them along. Thanks for bringing the letter in person. Travis stood up slowly, his eyes a little lighter. Good luck. Chef Ellery. You don't need your brother's last name for people to respect you. You earned it yourself. Eli watched Travis's retreating figure, then opened the envelope. The familiar, slanted handwriting short. Honest lines, I chose competition over collaboration. Tearing down instead of learning. But you didn't retaliate with hatred, but with dignity. I owe you an apology, and I owe myself a lesson in character. Signed, someone who thought he was good enough to not need a guide. Eli folded the letter and put it in his inside pocket, not to forgive immediately, but to remember. A young employee walked over and asked quietly, "Chef, is order 48 done?" Eli turned back, his voice steady. "It's on time. Today. Don't let a single dish get cold for even a second." He returned to the kitchen. His steps were light, but his heart was heavier, not with hatred, but because the final wound had been opened. And this time it was to heal. Friday, 9:12 a.m. Ellery's Prime had just opened. The scent of lightly burning oak, roasted coffee, and toasted bread drifted through the air, mixing with the golden sunlight pouring through the large glass windows of the waiting area. The kitchen hummed with the sound of running water and the familiar rhythm of knives on cutting boards. Eli was sitting at the end of the long table, the one usually reserved for family meals. In front of him was a hot cocoa, a new diagram for reorganizing the workflow, and a few notes he was reviewing to prepare for the upcoming recruitment of new prep cooks. The door opened. The small bell chimed. A young woman walked in wearing a worn white shirt, her hair tied back neatly, clutching a hard paper file folder. Her eyes. There was something very familiar about them. Not her face, but the hesitation, the nervousness, yet the determination to appear calm. She looked around, a little flustered when she didn't see a hostess stand. She tightened her grip on the folder, took a deep breath, and walked toward the table. Before she could say anything, Eli stood up. He picked up his steaming mug of cocoa and walked slowly toward her, a gentle smile on his face, not trying to seem approachable, but honest and warm. "Hi." His voice was low, soft. "Here for an interview?" She nodded. "Yes. I know today is the interview day for prep cooks. I came a little early. If that's not a problem." "Not at all." Eli interrupted, holding out his hand. "I'm Eli, the head chef. It's nice to meet you." She was momentarily stunned. "You're the head chef?" "Yep." He nodded. I once stood right where you're standing, holding a resume, just as nervous. And I was once judged for things that had nothing to do with cooking. He placed the cocoa mug on a nearby table, pushing it toward her. Hot cocoa made with real milk, and you don't have to order it. Consider it a welcome. Here, we don't just hire people who know how to cook, we hire people who know why they want to cook. She slowly sat down, her hands still clutching the folder. I've worked at 3 different restaurants, but every one of them said, "We need someone with at least 2 years of specialized grilling experience." I don't have that. I just have passion. Eli smiled. I was once rejected for having the same last name as the owner. Her eyes widened. He shrugged. So I changed my name, applied as a nobody, and worked my way up from prep cook. A short silence. The girl looked at the cocoa, then at Eli, her eyes gradually brightening. You don't care that I've never made oak-smoked ribs. I care if you're willing to learn. She nodded, very slowly, but with certainty. Eli smiled, holding out his hand again. Well then, welcome to Ellery's Prime. You're not anything here yet, but you could be the best thing that's about to happen. She shook his hand. For the first time that day, she smiled. In the corner of the kitchen, Mason stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe, witnessing it all. He didn't step in. He didn't need to say a word, because he knew the journey of a great chef doesn't begin with fame, but with how they treat the person who comes after them. The circle had closed. But it was also the moment another one began. A restaurant is run by rules. A kitchen is coordinated by discipline. But only places with humanity can truly become a home for those who carry a love for every slice of meat, every drop of stock, every single meal. 6 months later, Ellery's Prime, Austin branch, was no longer just one of the high-end restaurants in the area. It had become the heart of the entire system. Eli's return, this time with his real name, wasn't just a personnel shake-up, but a complete rebirth. A new menu was introduced, retaining the classic spirit, but infused with gentle, humane, and deeply personal creations. A new team, cohesive, honest, and embodying the spirit of cooking as if for your own family. Customers who had left had returned. Food critics who once shook their heads now wrote rave reviews. Revenue increased, but more importantly, trust was restored. One Saturday afternoon, Mason walked into the restaurant unannounced this time to have a meal with his mother. Eli greeted her at the door, wearing a chef's coat with a small line of text embroidered on the sleeve, "For Dad, who taught us that food made with integrity nourishes more than the body." She held her 2 sons' hands tightly. All 3 of them smiled the relieved smile of people who were once distant, now finding each other again over a warm dinner. After the meal, Mason and Eli stood leaning on the railing of the back patio, the same spot where their father used to light the charcoal grill every weekend. Mason said slowly, "I used to think that maintaining a big brand was enough to be called a success." Eli just smiled, his gaze distant, "And I used to think that I had to escape your shadow to be my own person. They looked at each other for the first time in years, with no hang-ups, no bruised egos, only kinship and pride. Mason placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. I was wrong to think a restaurant lives by its menu. It turns out it lives because of the people behind the kitchen counter and the reasons they don't give up. Eli replied softly, and I was wrong to think that staying silent would keep anyone from getting hurt. The truth, sometimes it has to be spoken so that decency can stand up. Night fell. The kitchen lights were still on. The remaining team was cleaning up, laughing and talking quietly. Eli went back inside, set down his apron, and prepared to leave. He paused at a photograph hanging on the wall, an old picture of Mason and their late father on the opening day of the first branch. Quietly, Eli hung a new picture next to it, a photo of the current kitchen team, with a small caption, "Family, not just those who share blood, but those who keep the fire burning together." In a world of rushed meals, perfectly cooked steaks, and endless competition, there are still people who choose to cook as an act of love, and there are families reunited not by words, but by the way they stand by the fire together, once more and forever.